Morning. I assume the mic's working. Give me a little wave if it is. Perfect. Thanks. I have no idea what Mike just said because I can't hear a thing without the headphones, so I assume it was all good. Yeah, fine, brilliant. When I woke up this morning sweating through my sheets, what I really wanted to do today was come and stand in a hot car park in East London and come and melt on stage. So thanks for coming. It's going to get hotter. I think this is probably a pretty good time. You're on the attention stage. Funny enough, we're talking about attention, and I've got Simon Moore here today from Dreams. I've been talking about attention for a long time. Actually, tomorrow there's a panel, 4-ish in the evening, talking about 10 years of investigating attention metrics, and it's been that long. What I love about this is there's a client of ours that's really putting all of this stuff into action and uses it day to day to make their media planning smarter and better. So really good to hear from Simon. Why is attention important? I want to start with this video. My wife sent me this a couple of months back from a comedian called Kim Blythe. I'm just going to play it because I think it kind of lays out why we need attention metrics.
Right, I'm thinking when anyone clicks one of their articles, we just constantly jump the page, you know, and they're trying to read it, we'll bring them back up to the top and we'll just make it a bit of a challenge for them to read.
She's a genius.
Thanks. I'm also thinking if they click anywhere else on the page, it'll take them to a completely different article, one that they have no interest reading about. Let's take them through the whole website.
What about video?
Video, perfect. I think a video should play during every article. The video should have absolutely fuck all to do with what the article's about. But we should just play anyway. Why not?
Amazing. What about adverts?
Adverts. Fuck. Right, we probably should put a few adverts in and try and raise some revenue. I'm thinking 90% advert, 10% content.
More adverts.
Like that. Yeah, and why don't, when someone's reading it, we'll just keep adding more adverts in. We'll just keep loading more and more adverts. You know, we want the website to look like there's a virus, you know, like it's been hacked. Yeah.
All the adverts.
Yes,
Do that for the lesbian.
There you go. It's funny because it's true, right? Publishers take note, right? There's a really bad media experience that has been perpetrated because of terrible metrics that we hold ourselves for success. So click-throughs and website visits that mean very little. A friend of mine, Andrew Spurrier-Dawes, calls them shitty little digital metrics, and I think he's right, okay? They don't mean anything. So what do we know about attention? Like when I have conversations about attention, some people say, oh, this is quite a new concept. It's not something that's been particularly well researched or developed. It's absolute nonsense. We've been doing this for 10 years. All of these papers here from Dentsu's Attention Economy paper in 2019, follow-ups, Karen Nelson-Field's books, the study we'll talk about today, so what did 9,000 brand lift studies teach us about attention and memory. Dr. Grace Kite, lots of little presentation, fantastic, talks about how attention builds over time, and the work of Peter Field and Karen Nelson-Field recently at Cannes, The Cost of Buying Dull Media. That's a brilliant study if you've not read it, just published at Cannes, and she talks about $198 billion worth of media investments wasted in media that nobody sees. Nobody sees it at all, absolute waste. So this is a massively, massively researched area, and we're proving that attention to media and advertising matters. Sounds pretty obvious, but I think it's pretty well proven. Onto the, not about driving brand. The other thing I hear quite a lot is our attentions are really good for brand metrics, for making people more aware or for driving consideration. But if anyone saw the Ubiquity and Group M Profitability 2.0 work that was amazing, that did a huge study of ROI across billions of pounds of advertising investment, the Lumen team also worked with them to correlate how well attention metrics looked versus profitability, and they found a near perfect correlation between media that people look at and look at for longer, better quality media experiences, and the profit returned in both the short and long term. I'll go and have a read of that study as well, it's fantastic. So not only does attention drive brand measures, but it's also performing for businesses. The way to think about attention, so when we talk about attention at Havas, and when we talk about attention, one thing we have to be very clear on, which is something that academia seems to get tied up in a little bit, is what we're really talking about at the moment is visual attention. What happens when people look at ads? You could extrapolate that to emotions and to heart rates and to feelings. What we're trying to solve for is anyone actually bloody looking at the stuff that we're putting out there, and is it of good enough quality to be able to do that? So that's what we talk about when we talk about attention. And ultimately what that does is mean that more of the media you're buying, more of the stuff you're paying for is seen, so you're reaching more people, you need attention to deliver reach, and it means that more of that, more attention equals greater impact, and we'll show that through some of these studies, through some of the studies you saw on the earlier pages. So I'm going to talk quickly about our study we published end of last year, I think. And we looked at, one of the things that clients kept asking us was, well, I get attention, I need some attention, but how much attention do I need? And what happens when I get more of it? So how effective is attention? And we said, right, okay, we can do something about this. So we work with Lumen, and we work with a company called Brand Metrics, who run brand lift studies across thousands of digital campaigns, to look at digital display, what's the relationship between attention and brand lift. And we looked at, obviously, kind of page metrics and viewability metrics. We looked at frequency, super important, because historically, lots of these studies have only really talked about the impact of a single exposure versus another single exposure, not what happens when you build attention over time. Obviously, attention data alongside brand lift data to really try and make this point that you need attention to drive growth in those measures. And here are some of those key findings. So the first one is, unsurprisingly, what you're looking at along the bottom is attention time aggregated. So that could be 10 seconds of 1 second of attention, so it could be 10 exposures, or it could be 1 of 10 seconds. This is aggregated data over time. And what you find is, unsurprisingly, that for awareness, consideration, preference, even action intent, more attention equals bigger lifts in those key measures for brands. Less impactful, obviously, against the things that need more, so actually going to buy something or do something. Relatively simple to drive a lift in exposures at low levels. And you typically see, if anyone's read Karen Nelson Field's work, she talks about the 2.5 second rule, that you need 2.5 seconds of attention to drive growth in the memory structures that drive mental availability for brands. You see similar stuff here, right? The biggest lift comes from around that 2 to 3 second point. So I hate this chart. I keep presenting this chart and it's shit. But ultimately, aggregate attention time is crucial. It's not just about one exposure at high attention, especially when you look at digital display media, right? We're thinking about digital display media only here. You need multiple exposures of attention over time to drive that growth. And here's why, right? So this is looking at digital display data. This is the number. This is the frequency. Along here, and this is how much of your ads were actually looked at. So if you had 100 ads, only 44% of them get looked at if you serve one, right? So serving an ad does not mean it's seen. Over half of the ads will not get looked at all. You haven't reached anybody. You've served an ad, you've not reached anybody. You've reached half of them, right? And really, typically what you find is as you build frequency and as you build repetition, attention grows. So, unsurprisingly, and it always makes me laugh, so anyone that's been in media planning for long enough will know the sort of 3+ frequency rule. How much do I need? 3+ is the typical stock answer. But funny enough, it pays that off, right? So around 3+ is where you see the greatest lift in focus. And you also then get greater aggregated attention. So this is what attention adds up over multiple exposures. So you get more reach, real reach against human beings, and you get greater attention. Super important. The last one, so when you look at that together alongside awareness, what we tend to find is ads with very low or little attention, which are pretty much MFA and really crap ads, actually have a negative impact on awareness. Why would it be minus? Misattribution, right? If you serve ads that people don't see, they will misattribute the brand to someone different in a different environment. And ultimately, even ads, digital display ads of high attention at low frequency still won't push forward on something like brand awareness. You need frequency to drive uplift in brand awareness. And again, thinking about Karen's rule, look at Dr. Grace Kite's work around lots of little attention. These things all tell you the same stuff. Little attention over a long time, over a period of time, can drive growth in those brand measures. And typically, again, it's above that kind of 2 to 3 second point where you see optimal. The final thing that we then did was to look at cost. So obviously, it's cheaper to buy low attention media, lower quality media, so how did cost correlate with that across the different things? We built this into our planning tools for clients at Havas so they can pick the right strategies that are cost effectively most likely to deliver growth in those targets. Okay, who was paying attention? Okay, so I randomly, that wasn't a mistake in the presentation, randomly threw up some brand logos throughout that presentation. I'm going to ask you if you think it was group 1. So there were 4 brands in there. Put your hands up if you think it was group 1. One person. 2 people. Okay, 2 people. Hands up if you think it was group 2. A couple of people. Even Mike Follett's in on this one. Who thinks it was group 3? Well done. A vast majority of you, so Jim Sharp probably threw you because it's a hard logo to recognise, picked the 4 correct brands. Frequency of 3, individual exposure of about 1 second. Have I proven the point? Perfect, there you go. And those are the 4 brands, just to make sure you knew. Right, Simon's going to come up and talk about how Dreams are putting this into practice day to day and all of their media stuff. So Simon, come over to talk. I think I'm on time.
Can everyone hear me now? Yeah. I don't know why I've still got these on. Can I give you? Right, okay. So our journey into the attention world just really came a few years ago. And part of the problem with that was that depending on who you talk to, depends on basically what the measurement metric is. A lot of the time it's all about it's reach. And pre-COVID, we were in that reach space. But what's the point in reaching people if they don't see it? I mean, you can't ask someone to take away from half a second of an ad and only see 3/4 of it and expect to change someone's attitude. So we started on a journey and we looked at attention by channel. We did a number of dives into big screen versus small screen because the environment actually changes how the outcome is. We then looked through how we would change those metrics into our plans, and basically it brings us up to date where we've got multiple metrics that we've been using over the time. But really, in our world, you know, you're bombarded with so many different metrics, you know, CPT, CPM, CPC, and all of those different bits. But it really comes back to the fact that not all impressions are equal. And it's all about understanding that common denominator in your outcome. Yes, creative is an important factor. And we've done a lot of testing in our world where we've done Neuro Insight, we've done System 1, and we look at ads, we make sure they're optimized before we put them into test environments. And we see really attention is the common denominator in making all your plans stack up. This is an interesting one, and this is actually live data that we did a few years ago. The left-hand side is basically showing you the cost per 1,000 impressions. As you'd expect, the lower end, social, display, it's going to be much, much cheaper than BVOD at the top. However, when you apply the attention and you look at the cost per 1,000 seconds, it's completely reversed. So social is now the worst performing or the most expensive because it delivers the least amount of attention, whereas TV is actually the cheapest in this context because the average second count per ad is far higher. And it's these principles that you establish that allow you to take it forward into your own plans. So if we take that one step further and we look at some basic principles, and this is a model that we use, that if you just plan to reach, and that's the first bar, you'll end up with a split slightly different. Few nuances, few tweaks, and you put it into a reach plan, you're bringing in more channels, and you're looking at reach, and you have more digital within that space. However, apply attention into that, and your plan changes once more, and then ultimately, where we get to in this model, you've got nearly 1 million more reach people and 12% on attentive seconds. So using this from our perspective, we were able to take our workings and apply it into our latest ad creative, which also went through System 1 and Neuro Insight before we ran out there. We also teamed up with Google, and we want to test the YouTube environment. So we wanted to look at non-skip TV ads in the big screen. And basically, what we were able to achieve once we'd optimized our ads, lower CPM than planned, high completed rates, and actually a much, much lower cost-efficient ACPM, cost per 1,000 seconds. We take the same principle forward, and although I said social is a little least performing, at the end of the day, we still need social to drive reach. So we take the same principles that we've done from our bigger campaigns and we apply that into testing in social. So we're constantly testing different ads from video to short form, long form, different ad creatives, and that allows us to optimize into a more successful output. So really, it's really hot in here, getting dry. what we were able to do is establish the cost of attention and focus on quality. We made small tweaks to our channel plan that allowed us to drive more efficiency. And actually, if you lose attention correctly, you get one step ahead of the competition. And as we see it, we see attention as the common denominator, and it runs across all of our tests, all of our activity, and we review it monthly. And that is it. Thank you for listening.
So Simon, can you stay up for just a couple of questions? And actually for you too, John. One
I might need the headphones.
Yeah, you might need the headphones. And there's some water here. So, one thing, this is usually just sort of housekeeping. This is actually health and safety here. There is water everywhere.
Just grab some headphones.
You just have to drink it.
Thank you.
But please do keep yourself hydrated. So just a couple of questions,
it's coming
guys. One thing was, Simon, you were saying that you've been using these metrics for some time. Is it getting any easier?
No. It is, if anything, it's becoming more complicated, because all that keeps happening is you've got more metrics. You've got AI now on the platform, and you'll be having the chats with Google, and they'll be saying, bring in new methods, new platforms, new additions, and that adds a higher level of complexity. It's just becoming harder and harder and harder. It never slows down.
So there's always new things. How about you, John? You've spent quite a long time building this sort of stuff, sort of embedding it into your planning tools. Do you think has that made things easier for you?
I think it's easy to do the quick wins. I think you can get the quick wins quite easily. So doing what Simon was talking about, adjusting your reach to make sure you haven't got as much wasted. But I think it's so nuanced beyond that every single brand that we work with has to go on their own kind of attention roadmap and journey. So that relationship we were showing between attention time and lifting brand measures or performance is different for every client. It's not going to be the same for a Coca-Cola as it is a Gymshark, for example. So going on that kind of test and learn agenda with every single client is really time consuming, and you have to go through the education piece and go through the test and learn and working together. So it's not super simple, and it adds a whole new dimension, but I think it's worth it, right? It's a new, new dimension on media planning.
I was going to say, it's absolutely true. I think every brand or every different product you're bringing out there will have a very different performance. Those were our metrics. When you look at others, it could be completely different. Yeah. So it is, but then once again, as I said earlier, there is a massive element of creative. If you've got really strong creative, that could be a 4-star on System 1 versus a 5-star. The performance will be very different once again.
One final question, we've got 30 seconds on this. Dreams has really lent into sponsorship with Olympics and lots of sporting events.
Team GB and
TGB in the Paralympics. How do you measure that?
That is the never-ending question. I mean, we look at, as well as doing attention, we have traditional brand metrics that we go into. So we'll look at sales performance. We're a retailer after all, so it's always about the weekly sales. We look at footfall, and footfall is a key metric for us. Last year in the Olympics campaign, we saw significant footfall growth, and we saw that sustained right the way through the year as we've been advertising more. So we've got footfall, we've got website visits, we've got our brand metrics. If everything correlates and triangulates up, then that's what the positive outcome is. As well as the Paralympics and Team GB, it also has a hearts and minds internal aspect, so it's good to rally the troops and get everyone behind it. So there's lots of metrics.
Well, thank you very much, guys. Guys, a round of applause. Would you be happy if the people have more questions?
Sure.
Please do see the guys in the Lumen bar over there. Okay, well, thank you very much, guys.